Hello, explorers, and welcome to Reach the World's Explorer program. For 25 years, Reach the World has inspired youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens through virtual exchange. My name is Tim, and I'm so glad you're joining us for today's live stream event. Today, we are journeying south to the country of Brazil for our kickoff live stream event with explorer Madison Clark. Madison is a Fulbright U.S. student program researcher who has been traveling all over Brazil, conducting research on a very fascinating chapter of U.S. and Brazilian history. And if you've been reading her early virtual exchange articles, you know a little bit about that already. But if you're brand new to Madison and her expedition, we'll have her joining us live from Brazil in just a minute to introduce herself and tell you how she explores through history. Let me say welcome real quick to the teachers and students who are joining us live today. We'll have some students who will be on camera today asking Madison questions, and we'll have some more students who are watching live via YouTube. If you are one of those YouTube classrooms, please feel free to use the YouTube chat bar to let us know you're here, where you're joining from, and of course to share any questions at any time you have for Madison as we go. If you put them in the chat, I'll see them. We can fold them into our conversation, and we'll get to as many questions as we can as we get to know Madison in these next 40 to 45 minutes or so. With that introduction, I would like to get this virtual exchange officially underway. And in order to do that, I'm going to bring our friend, explorer Madison Clark, onto the big stage. Hi, Madison.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
I am great. It is so nice to see you. It is exciting to be talking with you all the way from Brazil and to have our first live stream event with you. Can you please just tell me where you're joining us from today?
Sure. Today, I am in the city called Belém, which is in the state Pará, which is in way northern Brazil, close to the equator and very close to the Amazon rainforest.
All right, excellent. So you are joining us from quite a ways away, really, when I think about on a map, directly below me, more or less, where I am in Chicago. So it's great that you can join us. You have prepared a really great collection of photos to give us sort of an introduction to you. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell us some stories.
Thanks so much, Tim. I appreciate that. Well, yes, hello, everyone that's joining us today. As Tim said, my name is Madison, and I am having a great journey researching here in Brazil. But today, I just want to talk a little bit about who I am so you can get to know me a little bit more. So this is a picture of me when I was very young, probably about maybe 2 or 3 years old. I was born in Montgomery, Alabama, which is in the southern part of the United States. And I had a very, very, very interesting childhood. I was very interested in history at a very young age. I used to love reading about stories from the past, about old times with either they be kings or queens or different tribes in Africa, and especially just about the history in my home state in Alabama. In the South, we had a lot of history when it came to civil rights. And there were some people in my family who are part of the civil rights movement. So history was really, really important to me growing up. I grew up in a family with my mom and my brother. And even though sometimes life may have been a little bit difficult with just the three of us, we made sure that we had everything we needed always. But history was always very, very important to me. Some other interests I have and continue to have, you'll see on the next picture I have, is books. I've always loved reading. I started reading when I was very young, probably about the age I was in the other picture. I used to spend hours and hours in the library going through every book that I could find. And I also really loved listening to music on the radio. That's pretty much how I spent a lot of my days. I would read books from the time I got up, even, when I was in school, when I finished my work in class, I would pull out a book and start reading. And then at night, I listened to the radio a lot, and I fell in love with so many songs. My favorite artist, my favorite musician who I love to listen to, who you can see in that picture in the back a little there, is Michael Jackson. I love Michael Jackson. I've always loved Michael Jackson. He's always been one of my favorite artists. So from a very young age, my brother would actually show me different music videos of Michael Jackson. And that made me even more excited to learn about the places he would make some of these videos. And at one point, I think I must have been about maybe 7 or 8 years old, somewhere around then. There was a video of Michael Jackson that took place in Brazil. And it was the first time I ever learned about Brazil, learned about this country existing. And it really, really interested me. And I wanted to learn more about what this country had to offer. And then later in life, such as I now, I got to even come here. But we'll talk about that in a little bit later more. In the next picture I have, it shows me a little bit older. This is after I've gone through elementary school, after I finished middle school, and this is right after I finished high school. I started going to work, and I used to be a waitress. I used to wait tables and give people the food and drinks at different restaurants. The picture you see on the screen is a picture of me at a restaurant called Texas Roadhouse, and I had lots of fun there. This is one of the people who used to come see me maybe once a week or once every other week. He would always come sit in my section, and sometimes, as you can see in the picture, he would let me wear his cowboy hat. At Texas Roadhouse, we had a lot of fun because once every hour we would dance. So they would turn the music up and we would do line dancing for our guests. So it was a pretty exciting atmosphere to be able to meet people, bring them their food and drinks, and then you get to dance for them. So I worked in different restaurants for a while after high school. But I noticed that a lot of my other friends from high school were going off to college. And I didn't do that immediately because I didn't know if I wanted to go to college or not. One day, one of my teachers pulled me aside and he asked me, why didn't I go to college? And I said, I don't know what I would do in college. So we talked about things I enjoyed, including history. And he said, why don't you go to college to study history? I never really thought that was an option for me. So he said, just try and see what happens. And that's been my motto in life ever since. Just try and see what happens. So then I started college when I was about 22 years old, which is a little later than most students, but better late than never. So I started college and I started studying history. And at first, I really started studying more about civil rights history. On the next slide you see, this is a picture of a group called Freedom Riders. Now, the Freedom Riders were a group of people who tried to help integrate bus systems. Now, integrate means where Black people and white people can sit together instead of being segregated, where they had to sit separately. A few decades ago in the United States, unfortunately, Black and white people couldn't sit together. And so there were groups of people who thought that wasn't fair, that wasn't right. So the Freedom Riders, as you see in this picture, were some of those people who wanted to change the law and make it so that everybody can sit with each other. And I worked at a museum that helped to teach people about this. Thanks to the professors I had in college, they helped direct me to this museum and a few other museums in Montgomery so I could teach other people about history that happened in Alabama. So when I worked at this museum, I learned a lot about civil rights history. I was able to design and make tours so people from all over the world could come to Montgomery, and I could give them these tours to learn about or to teach them about Montgomery, Alabama, and all the history it has, and how much progress the city has made since the 1950s and 1960s, all the way into the 2000s and beyond. So I really, really liked being in this world thanks to what I was able to learn from college and how my professors were able to help me get these jobs in these museums. But something I really, really valued while I was in these museums is the importance of determination. The people that I would speak to about the freedom riders, people I talked to about other people in the civil rights movement, would be so determined to reach their goals. So I was trying to remember I need to be determined to reach my goals, since so many other people before me worked really, really hard to reach theirs. It looks like we may have a couple audio issues. I'm hoping everyone can still hear me okay.
Yep, we're doing great, Madison. Sounds good.
Excellent. Awesome. So yeah, so I stayed determined with my goals when it came to teaching history, but I wanted to learn a little bit more history, like go really, really in depth to see how the history of the past can have an influence into today. So after I finished college, I went to do more research in more college called graduate school. So graduate school is after you finish college, it's like super college. So you go to graduate school to do really, really intense research about a topic. And so I went to research more about African Americans and what happened to them after they got out of slavery. So I moved all the way from Alabama all the way to California, across the country, so I could study at a different school where I could get my master's degree. So after you finish college, you can get your master's degree to show that you've mastered a certain subject on whatever topic you want. So my topic was about African Americans after the Civil War and how life was for them. So I spent about 2 years researching that in California. And while I was there, I started teaching. And again, just like I learned from my time in the museums, I try to stay determined with my goals, to try to stay focused and determined on my goals. So I taught at a university called California State University, Fullerton. And now I was teaching people who were in college and teaching them about history and other issues related to African Americans throughout time. At the same time, I was teaching as a professor at this college. I also worked at the happiest place on earth, and I worked at Disneyland, which I thought was really, really fun. It was really exciting that I could be working at Disney and get to see Mickey and Minnie and Goofy and all these amazing characters every day. And I could go to Disneyland whenever I wanted for free. So it was really fun that I got to go to teach the first part of the day. And the second part of the day, I could go to Disneyland and work there and help people with their vacations and the time they had at Disney. Is this maybe a good time we can stop and ask for some questions?
Yeah, sure. I have a couple of questions. Our classroom that was joining on camera is working out some audio issues. So if you don't mind, I'll ask a couple questions.
Sure.
First of all, it's really, really cool that you love history. There are a lot of Reach the World students who find history really interesting too. The study of, things that have happened in the past. Lots of students who may be watching this are learning about history in their social studies classes, and maybe are learning about different aspects of United States history or world history. Besides the civil rights era and African-American history within the United States, are there any other areas of history that you're really interested in? Are there second pockets of topics that you find really fascinating?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, much of my research now includes an era in history about almost 100 years before the Civil Rights Movement. In U.S. history, we had the Civil War, which was a war fought in the United States in 1861 to 1865, which is a long time ago. But after the Civil War, I really like looking at the years from 1865 until about maybe 1915. That's the area of research that really interests me because I want to see what happened after the war, how people felt, how they thought, what they were doing, and how a lot of people even migrated from the South to other places in the world, which is why I'm here in Brazil now. So yeah, that's one area of research that I really, really enjoy learning more about, because a lot of people just think of the Civil War and stop there and then jump to a whole different century. But I like seeing what happened immediately after.
I love the idea of you exploring through history and in some ways being a little bit of a time traveler, going back and looking at clues from the past to better understand how things that happened in the past impact the present and the future. And that's such a good sort of preview of what we're going to get much more into in this virtual exchange, because this whole virtual exchange is about exploring through history and your work that you're doing in Brazil. I see that our classroom in New York is still working on getting connected. So why don't we keep going on your slideshow and give them a little more time. If anybody who's watching through the live stream has questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll work them in. But for now, Madison, let's keep going with your photos.
Excellent. And with that, if you can do me a favor and just get to there we go. Awesome. So this is a picture of me back in 2019. And this is my dad. This is when I graduated from my graduate school. So we went to college and then I went to graduate school for my master's degree in California. And this is my dad who came to support me on my graduation day. And this is in California. So after my time in California, one of my professors said, you should do more school. So after my master's, I decided to go get my PhD, which is also called a doctorate degree. Now, this isn't doctor like medicine doctor, but this just means someone who is really, really focused on one particular topic and is an expert in that topic. So after I finished school in California, I decided to go get my doctorate or PhD in Indiana. So again, I had to move across the country again. And as you can see in the next slide, I wasn't very comfortable with the new environment. I had to go from sunny Southern California, where there was Disneyland and lemons on the trees and fresh mangoes, all the way to Indiana, where it was really cold. And I wasn't used to the cold. I had lived, most of my life in Alabama and then California, where it was hot and sunny. And Indiana has sunny days too, but it was the first time I ever had to live in snow. So that was a whole new experience for me. So being in Indiana was quite the culture shock. I had to not only get used to the cold, but this was also the time when the whole world was experiencing a huge pandemic. I'm not sure if everyone in Ms. Sales' class remembers, but a few years ago, there was a whole pandemic that happened where a lot of people in the world were getting sick with the coronavirus, the COVID virus, right? And so we had to stay locked in our homes so we didn't go out and spread germs everywhere. And during this time, I had to learn new hobbies and new crafts while I was still getting adjusted to my new life in Indiana as a PhD student. So in the next slide, you'll see some hobbies I picked up. I really, really, really like cooking because I like to eat. But I like cooking. And so something I did during the pandemic is that I would make meals for people in the community and for some of my friends. So a lot of the meals I made were typical Southern dishes. There would be fried chicken, mac and cheese, black-eyed peas, cornbread, candied sweet potatoes, these kind of foods. And I would make plates and deliver them to some of my friends who may have been homesick, who may have been lonely, who may have just wanted some company, and may just wanted like a fresh meal, a fresh homemade meal. So I started cooking for my friends, and I also started gardening during the pandemic. So a lot of the things that I would grow in my garden, I would later cook. For example, the peas that you see in that picture are actually from the garden that I grew during the pandemic. So I would grow peas or grow tomatoes or grow okra, all these sorts of things. And then I'll cook them for my friends and I to enjoy later. So that was a really good kind of hobby I did during the pandemic to kind of keep our spirits up, because it can get kind of stressful. Speaking of stress, on the next slide, you'll see lots of the work I had to do as a PhD student. Remember when I said I loved reading as a kid? Well, that's really important, because when you're getting your PhD, you have to do a lot of reading. So these are just some of the books I had to read for this big test I had to get my PhD, or as I get my PhD. I had to read over 100 books within 5 months. So I had 5 months to read about 100, I think it was like 112, something like that, 112 books within 5 months. And I had to not only read them, but I had to know what the books were about. So later on, when I got tested, I could tell my professors. That's part of what it means to get a PhD, to be an expert in your field. So I'm getting my PhD. It's a type of history, but it's not exactly history. It's called African American and African Diaspora Studies, which is basically meaning I'm learning all about Black culture, Black history, Black movements, anything to deal with Black people, either in the United States or anywhere in the world, really. So learning about Black studies was kind of my focus, or is my focus, as I get my PhD. So a lot of the books you see on the screen here have to deal with Black culture in general. And so I had to read about it, be tested upon it, so I can be an expert in the field. And thankfully, that's one of the goals I'm reaching towards, and I'm getting very, very close to accomplishing very soon. But as I was doing this research, I had to narrow down one topic to be very proficient in, to be a super expert in. And as I was doing my research about Black studies, I thought about, what in Black culture is really appealing to me, along with my love for history. Remember I said I loved learning about right after the Civil War and what happened to people after the Civil War? Well, I learned in just a random article I found one day that there were groups of people after the Civil War who left the South and moved to Brazil. And I thought, well, that's different. Why did they do this? So a lot of these people who went to the South were people who were part of the Confederacy, or the southern part of the United States in the Civil War. And a lot of them migrated to Brazil so they could kind of relive their life like it was in the United States before slavery ended, which means they wanted to continue slavery. And Brazil was one of those countries at that time who still allowed slavery. So a lot of Confederate families went to Brazil so they could start a new life, so they could keep enslaving people. And so I thought, well, that's not very nice. And I wanted to learn, what did people in Brazil, particularly Black Brazilians, what did they think about all these Confederate families coming to Brazil to live? So that's why I decided that's what I wanted my topic and my research to be about. I wanted to research, how did Black Brazilians respond to all these Confederate families moving to Brazil after the U.S. Civil War. But in order to research that, there are a lot of goals I had to meet. You see in the next slide, I had to spend a lot of time not only researching about my topic, but how to achieve my goal. So again, the library became a very, very safe place for me. It became one of my favorite places because, like I said, I've always loved books. I always loved reading. And in the library, I found a lot of answers. So to reach my goal, I know I had to do three things. I had to learn Portuguese, which is the language they speak here in Brazil. I had to learn more about Brazil because I really only knew a lot about the United States, and I had to find a way to get to Brazil. So the first step was to learn Portuguese. So the next picture, I went to a special school called Middlebury, and that's all the way in the state of Vermont, which is close, I think, to Miss Sales' class in New York, kind of, sort of, in Vermont. So I went to this special school where the focus was just to teach Portuguese, and that's it. So I could not speak in English the whole time I was there. I was there for about 8 weeks. And for those whole 2 months, I was not allowed to speak any English. I could only speak in Portuguese, which is really hard when I didn't know Portuguese yet. But that's how they teach you. They want you to be completely immersed in the language or completely surrounded in the language. So that way your brain can start to learn to think in Portuguese. So I started going to school not knowing much Portuguese at all. And by the end of the 2 months, I was able to carry a conversation. I was a little bit, I wouldn't say fluent, but, I was pretty good at it. And I had to keep practicing after I left the school. So I had to, make friends who spoke Portuguese and speak with them and just kind of keep that habit up every day. So that was the first thing off my list. The second thing on my list, as you see in the next picture, is to learn more about Brazil. Because again, most of my education had been just about the United States and not much about Brazil. So I would get to my office, which is the picture you see here. I would go to my office space and I would get there at 6 a.m. every day. Well, Monday through Friday. Monday through Friday, I would go to my office at 6 a.m. and just study and work and research and read and learn as much as I could about Brazil, about its climate, about its politics, about its history especially, and just how people there lived. So I did that for about, I would say 5 or 6 months or so, just going every day from 6 a.m. until about maybe 2 or 3 p.m. in the afternoon, just researching as much as I could about Brazil and learning as much as I could. And then finally, on the next picture, I had to figure out a way to get to Brazil. Well, there's a very, very big scholarship program called a Fulbright. And the Fulbright is basically this organization that gives funding to people to travel across the world to do research. And so I applied for it, and thankfully, I got it. Now, I'll be honest, the first time I applied, I didn't get it. So I had to apply a second time. Again, being determined with my goals. So even though I didn't get the first time, the second time I applied, I got it. And so I got the Fulbright, and they gave me the money and the funding that I needed so that I could come to Brazil and travel around the country and do the research I needed so I could learn more about Afro-Brazilians and the Confederates, also known as Confederados here in Portuguese. So that's what I've been doing. I got here in Brazil back in February of this year. And ever since then, as you see in the next picture, life has been very busy, but also very rewarding. This is a picture I took of where I used to study in a city called São Paulo in southern Brazil. You see, it's very different from my workspace back in Indiana, where I had the computer and the desk. Now my office space was very different, sitting outside, enjoying the beautiful weather, eating yummy foods. So when I first got here in Brazil in February, even though February is usually a cold time in the United States, it's the opposite here in Brazil. So it's very warm and very nice here in Brazil. So it's a very nice, warm welcome to start learning about my research, going to different archives. As you can see, I have lots of notes and papers that I'm going through here at my little office space, so to say. Most of my days were, going to different libraries, different archives. And archives are just like places that hold lots of old documents and materials from like hundreds of years ago. So I go to the archives and I'll go through the materials and try to read as much as I could about what people back in the 1800s were saying about the Confederates and what Black Brazilians were saying about the Confederates. So I gather all this material, which is really hard because, again, it's in Portuguese. So I had to read and understand it in Portuguese and then translate it into English so that other people can understand it too. But as you see on the next picture, life isn't, oh, I'm sorry, this is an example of a document I found from one of the archives. It's a newspaper from 1889, I believe, and it's giving an homage and memorial to a big event that happened in the area. I believe, if I remember correctly, this was in Rio de Janeiro, which is another city here in Brazil. And it was just talking about some of the great accomplishments that happened in Rio de Janeiro, especially after they ended slavery. So the U.S. ended slavery in 1865. Brazil didn't end slavery until 1888. So this newspaper is talking a little bit about like the, great accomplishments Brazil made when it came to ending slavery. But as you see on the next slide, life here hasn't just been totally about work and research. I have made wonderful friends, including my good friend here in this picture. His name is Flavio, and he's been one of my best friends since I've come here. He also speaks English, so that was really helpful. But he would also speak to me in Portuguese so I could, learn how to speak the language better too. This is at a festival that we attended back in June. And I'm eating a little street snack of just some meat on a stick with like flour sprinkled on it. Just a popular little snack people would eat on the street sometimes. And Brazil, because there were so many people here, a lot of these festivals, you would have thousands, maybe even millions of people out on the street at once. So it can be kind of scary sometimes, especially if you don't like being in large crowds. But thankfully, I had my friend Flavio here to help me. And I had other friends too that maybe we can talk about and show pictures of at a different time. But he's definitely one of my special friends. I've been to lots of different cities here in Brazil. The first one was Sao Paulo. I've also been to Rio de Janeiro. I think in the next slide, we may see, this is one of my favorite spots I've been to here in Brazil. This is in a city called Salvador. And as you can guess, this cardboard cutout is a picture of Michael Jackson. So remember I said I was a big Michael Jackson fan? Well, and I said that years ago, my brother showed me the video of Michael Jackson in Brazil. Well, this is a picture of me in the spot where that music video was shot all those years ago. So little Madison, when she was like 7 or 8 years old, who saw this music video with this artist that she loved, now I'm all grown up. And now here I am at the place where the music video was filmed. So that was definitely one of the highlights of my trip here in Brazil so far, to be in the spot where Michael Jackson was and where he filmed this very famous music video. Some other places I've been to, as you see on the next slide, include Rio de Janeiro. This is actually one of the bigger cities. It's on the coast, so there are lots of beaches. But this picture is from the apartment where I lived. And as you can see, it's a very hilly city. There are lots of hills, lots of mountains to go up on. So when I would walk around, I would get pretty exhausted and really tired having to go up and down the hills. But as you can see, it's a very, very beautiful city and beautiful landscape. It's quite different from where I am now, as you'll see on the next slide. This is where I am now. This is my neighborhood. It's a city called Belém, Pará, and I'm in a very, very rural part of Brazil. And this is northern Brazil. It's very close to the Amazon rainforest. So it's very hot. It's very humid. But, it rains almost every day here too. So it'll be really sunny in the morning. Afternoon, it may rain for about 30 minutes or so, and the sun comes back out. So very, very hot and sticky. But as you can see, it's very rural too. So not a lot of mountains, lots of dirt roads, and people here don't have as much money as other places in the country. But this is where I am now. This is where I'll be for the next few weeks until I return to the United States. And I love it all the same as other places I've been in Brazil. So that's kind of an overview of my time so far here in Brazil. And I'm excited to take any questions that people may have and answer them the best I can.
All right. Thank you, Madison. What a fantastic introduction to you and what you're doing and your journey to Brazil, how you got there. The classrooms that we have following are having a little bit of technical issues in the background and maybe just sort of waiting and processing and learning and absorbing all of these things you've told us about yourself. So they're being a little shy. I want to put a plug in to anybody who's watching and has a question to Madison. This is a really special opportunity to join us. You can submit your question in the chat bar. You can try to join us on camera. You can talk right to Madison and ask your question. That is something I'm sure Madison would love to answer for you. In the meantime, as you're working up your courage,
Absolutely.
Students, I want to be sure to share a little bit about how you can continue to follow Madison and her virtual exchange expedition at Reach the World. If you are a teacher, a K through 12 teacher, and you want to be the first to know about future live stream events with Madison, future opportunities for your students to ask Madison questions and learn about this really interesting period of history in Brazil and even Madison's modern day experiences in Brazil, you can use this link at the bottom of the screen to register your class. It doesn't cost anything. And I have handy right by the side of my screen here a beautiful expedition flag, whoops, upside down, that you can fly in your classroom to show how you are following Madison's expedition. So make sure you register today and you will not miss any of Madison's amazing articles or future live stream events. And the last thing I want to share before I ask a couple questions, if no one else is going to jump in, is the direct link to Madison's Journey homepage on Reach the World's website. Madison has already started publishing some articles for her virtual exchange. They share a little bit more about what she talked about today, how she got to be doing what she's doing, some of her early experiences and some of the Brazilian cities that she mentioned. And over the course of the next 7 or 8 weeks, we're going to go really in depth into her research and what it's like to be an explorer and explore through the lens of history. So definitely go check it out. Read some of the articles if you haven't read them yet, and you'll be prepared for our next live stream event. And with that, Madison, I have a bunch of questions, and we have just a couple more minutes to go before I know we both have to go on our way. But I have so many general questions for you about what it means to be an explorer through the lens of history. Sometimes when we talk about explorers, we think about people who are, out discovering new species or, going someplace that nobody has physically gone before, where their bodies, there hasn't been a human that has stood at the top of that mountain or at the bottom of the sea. But your method of exploration is really unique and special. Can you talk a little bit about what it feels like to explore through history?
Sure, yeah. I've always loved history because it really answers a lot of the questions we may have today. Like, why does, this work this way? Why do people think this way? Why do they behave this way? So when I go through history, almost like I'm time traveling, I get to see the events as they unfold to answer oh, well, this is because this happened back in 1902 or this happened in 1888. And being in Brazil and doing that history is, like you said, very unique because I'm coming from the United States and it's a history connected to the United States, but it's in Brazil. So I have to think like both a Brazilian and someone from the United States at the same time. Knowing that I'm going through a lot of these articles, a lot of these journals and diaries that probably know a lot of other people I haven't really been looking at before. They've just been kind of keeping them safe, it's exciting to know that like, wow, I'm probably one of the first people to really analyze and really go through these in detail to see how they can answer questions for today. And that's really exciting because it's like people from the past are like, let me show you what life was really like. You don't have to wonder. Here's the answer right here. So I like being able to explore through time that way. It's always been really fascinating for me.
All right. Yeah, very interesting. You talked a little bit about your efforts to learn Portuguese, and Portuguese, and anybody who's tried to learn another language knows that you really have to commit yourself. And it sounds like you have lived the Portuguese, life or the training process, and it's a big part of your research. I imagine when you find a really cool historical document that speaks to the kind of research you want to do, it's probably written in kind of old-timey Portuguese. What do you do when you find a document is really, really exciting and important for your work, and it's written completely in another language?
Well, I take a deep breath. And I remember it's always okay to ask for help. Some of these documents, I have to really squint my eyes and really take my time, line by line, letter by letter, even trying to see what it says and understand it. But sometimes I'm baffled and I can't get it. And in those moments, I just remember, hey, there's always someone else who can help me. So I talked to an archivist, I talked to a librarian, I talked to other people who are fluent in Portuguese and English, and I asked them to help me. That's something that I've had to remind myself. There's no shame in asking for help.
Yeah, sure. Well, good for you for, approaching this language in such a all-in way, and being this bridge between, different languages, different cultures, and starting to make some of those connections back in history. That's really exciting. I have to hold myself back from getting too deep into the exciting particulars of your research, because that is going to be the topic of our next live stream call together. We have accomplished our goal today of getting to know you and hearing about your journey to Brazil. Next time we connect in a couple of weeks, we're going to get really deep into what it means to go to an archive and discover these some maybe dusty, old, faded documents that have all of these clues to history, and are really, it's kind of, I think of it as kind of a treasure hunt. So we'll save that for later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I have one final question before we wind things down. I know from your Reach the World article that you sometimes like to do stand-up comedy. And just to end on a really fun note today, do you have a joke you can tell us to get us all laughing and on our way today?
Sure. I had a friend who used to give me lots of fun jokes. So this is one really fun joke he gave me. He says, what's the meanest farm animal? Like on a farm where you have chickens and cows and stuff. What's the meanest farm animal?
What is the meanest farm animal? I don't know.
A bully goat. Like a bully goat, but a bully goat, because it's mean.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Madison. It has been so much fun talking to you today, hearing from you. We are just at the start of your virtual exchange. For all the classrooms who are watching live today, watching the recording in the weeks to follow, make sure you check out Madison's Journey homepage. I'm going to put that back up here one more time so you don't miss it. Claim your expedition flag for Madison's expedition. I want to thank you, Madison, for the great talk today. It was really fun to hear more from you.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're just on the beginning of this journey together, and I'm so glad that you're here and willing to share your stories with us. So with that, I will say goodbye for now. Thank you so much, Madison. Thanks to everyone who's joining us. Everybody have a great week.
Ciao, ciao.